I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. Under the consideration this evening's hearing is the engineer's recommended Phase 2 repair for JD3. JD3 is designated as a trunk drainage system in the district's watershed management plan, and as such, repairs of the drainage system are funded by the district rather than by assessment to benefit landowners or by water management district charge within drainage areas of the drainage system. The purpose of this hearing is to review the engineer's recommended Phase 2 repairs and to receive comment from those affected by the proposed repairs. This is an evidentiary hearing proceeding. The proceedings are being recorded in order to preserve the record. The order of business for this hearing will be as follows. First, Ms. Ritchie, the Public Drainage Inspector, will introduce a presentation of information related to the proposed repair. The district's legal counsel will provide an overview of the actions taken by the Watershed District, bringing us to the hearing this evening, and the district's engineer will present information related to the proposed repair. Following the staff presentation, I will open the hearing for public comment. The board would like to hear what your comments are on the proposed repairs and any information relevant for the purpose. During the public hearing, managers may ask questions of staff or consultants making presentations and of commenters in order to clarify any testimony. In addition, if a member of the public asks a question and the manager believes that the response from the district staff or a district consultant can readily resolve the question to enrich the testimony, the manager may ask me to have the appropriate staff member or consultant speak to the question. I will exercise my judgment. However, managers' expressions of their positions and general discussion concerning the subject of final hearing should be avoided during the public comment portion of the public hearing. Board discussion will occur after all members of the public have had a chance to speak and the public comment period had been closed. Board discussion may occur and be concluded at this or subsequent meeting as the board decides tonight. If a member of the public would like to make a comment at the appropriate time, please stand and address the board when I recognize you. Speak clearly and give your name and address for the record. If you have a specific question concerning the proposed repair, we may ask administrator, engineer, or legal counsel to respond. If you have anything in writing that you wish to submit, you can provide it to me before the close of the public hearing, and I will note its receipt for the record. To ensure that all wishing to comment on the proposed repairs have time to speak, I may limit time to any single speaker, may be up to 5 minutes. So, with that, would any of the board members have any remarks they'd like to make? Okay, Ashley?
Thank you, Madam President. The Rice Creek Watershed District Board has been diligent in systematically repairing many of the drainage systems throughout the district to ensure predictable drainage and stormwater management. Tonight, we are presenting on the second phase of the repair of JD3. The plan to repair JD3 started several years ago in 2015 with a public process to correct the historical record. Then in 2018 and 19, after an inspection of the system, the board determined that the drainage system was in a state of systematic disrepair and directed Houston Engineering to provide a repair report. The repair report recommended 3 phases, and after public hearings, the board ordered the first phase of the repair in 2019. The construction of the first phase started in 2020 and was completed in 2021. District staff continue to regularly inspect and perform routine maintenance of the drainage system. To continue with the recommended second phase, the board requested an addendum to the original repair report, which is what our hearing is about tonight. I'll turn it over to Attorney Kolb to review the public noticing.
Madam President, members of the board, members of the public, the hearing this evening was noticed by publication, posting, and mail. Specifically by publication, notice of tonight's hearing was published in the St. Paul Pioneer Press on September 7th, 14th, and 21st, in the Citizen newspaper on September 8th, and in the Quad Press newspaper on September 13th. Notice by electronic mail was given to those on the district's email distribution list and all those requesting email notice of hearings and special meetings. That notice took place on August 30th. The district posted notice of the hearing at the district's offices and on the district's website, commencing on September 7th and remaining through the date of the hearing. By mail, the district provided notice to the owners of property and political subdivisions likely to be affected by the repair and the repair report. And this would include all owners of land traversed by and adjacent to the Phase 2 portion of the repair of Anoka, Washington Judicial Ditch Number 3. That mailed notice took place on September 7th. Additionally, the district provided mailed notice to an organization called Associa Minnesota, which is the management organization for the homeowners associations for the common interest communities that are located within the project area, the cities of Hugo and Lino Lakes, to Anoka County, Washington County, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the Board of Water and Soil Resources. That mailed notice took place on September 7th, 22. As Ms. Ritchie pointed out, we're in a bit of a unique posture because back in 2018, the board previously found as to the entirety of Anoka Washington Judicial Ditch Number 3 under consideration that it was in need of repair and that those repairs were in the best interest of the landowners. However, the board decided to move forward in phases and made a commitment to the landowners that were present at the first hearings in 2018 that it would have a hearing on each phase to determine whether those conditions still existed. So your consideration tonight is whether the conditions that you previously determined in 2018 are still valid, or if anything's changed that would cause you to say that the system is no longer in need of repair, which I think is probably difficult given the inspection reports, or that the repairs that are being recommended now in the engineer's addendum for Phase 2 are not in the best interest of those landowners. You may make a decision tonight if you find that comments that are received through the public comment tonight have been adequately addressed to your satisfaction. Also, as is often the case, comments don't go to the substance of the repair, the benefit from it, or the need from it, but are often questions that are seeking out additional information or detail regarding the process or the repair itself. To those comments, we could note them in the record, but they aren't. They may or may not be germane to your decision under the decision standards this evening. If the board finds that there are comments of substance that need to be addressed or commented on or developed as part of the record prior to making a decision, the board could continue this hearing to a date and time and location certain with instructions to staff to prepare findings in an order that would be consistent with the proceedings and responsive to any comments that need specific detail in an order. So with that, unless the board has any questions of me, I believe I'm followed by the engineer that will run through the Phase 2 recommendations for that portion of the repair.
Any questions for Mr. Cole? None? Okay.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm going to provide a presentation here now regarding JD3 branches 1, 2, and 4, the repair of that, and specifically discussing what we found now since the time of the prior hearing on the previous phase, as Attorney Kolb described just now here. The graphic you see on the screen here, that's aerial view of one of those branches and some of the conditions that you can see on there. And you can definitely see on that particular photo a lot of water sitting in the ditch, appears stagnant, and some obvious blockages already that you can see in this particular photo. So what I'll talk about here in my presentation are a number of different things, including how we got to this point, what the board will be looking at in their reviewing of the decision, and Attorney Kolb already laid that out in some detail here, so I probably will breeze through that part. Talking about the drainage system conditions that we see out there and how we would propose to repair the drainage system. I'll talk a little bit about our updated project costs that we've determined now since the prior public hearing, and then go over what the potential or anticipated schedule for repair would be following this proceeding. And then following our presentation, that'd be where there'd be then opportunity for public comment. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Rice Creek Watershed District, I'll run down a few different critical things to note about the district. The Rice Creek Watershed District does serve as a drainage authority for the public drainage systems that are within its boundaries. And in that role, it actually manages about 116 miles of public ditch and tile system And it does so on behalf of the landowners. So the landowners own the drainage system. The Rice Creek Watershed District manages on behalf of those owners. And in that role, it protects the landowner's rights to drain water into that public drainage system. It does do a number of other activities besides its role as the drainage authority. The Rice Creek Watershed District engages in a number of water quality projects and programs. It works on flood control throughout the watershed district, and it has a regulatory program that also addresses the quantity and quality of water within the watershed district. The area we're looking at today is where I have shown in this red box. That's kind of the general area that through which the JD3 traverses, and we'll be specifically talking about 3 of those branches on the drainage system that weren't repaired on that prior phase of the repair project. So one thing that we often get asked is, why do we even bother maintaining these public drainage systems? And it's important to note that it is a requirement under the state statute that the watershed district, as a drainage authority, has this responsibility to manage the drainage system. So in doing so and doing that maintenance, it fulfills its responsibility under the statute. It's important to try to keep ongoing maintenance as much as possible in order to manage the drainage system, particularly once the drainage system has been repaired. Doing that continual maintenance in the system is a lot more cost effective than waiting, 40, 50 years or longer, and then having to do a major clean out of the drainage system. However, in this particular case, these branches of the drainage system have not been cleaned out in a long time. So in this case, it is required to do this full repair because that maintenance hasn't occurred in the past. With completing this work, it will provide predictable drainage and stormwater management. And that's one of the keys here for the value of the property that are of the landowners that benefit from the drainage system, to know what level the water is going to get on particular rainfall events and be able to predict how you as landowners may be able to use your property. When you have an unmaintained system, you never know, depending on where a hump may be in the system, how high the water level will be going. So that, again, is one of the important reasons that we're doing this. So we have that fixed elevation on the system and know where the flooding will occur adjacent to the system. So why are these things important to you as landowners? Important to note that in general, the topography around this area is very flat, and it's like that in a number of areas around the Rice Creek Watershed District. There's also a high water table in this location, and that's, again, one reason why the ditch exists there in the first place. The area around Hugo, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with. It is one of the most rapidly urbanizing portions of the state, and because of that, you have this kind of balance between urban and rural interests that are in the area, and the drainage system needs to be able to provide an outlet for both of those kind of interests. And as such, the drainage system is the sole outlet for those lands that are served by the drainage system for those both those agricultural and urban land uses. So I mentioned that term before, predictable drainage and stormwater management, and we do a lot of different modeling in our role as the engineer on these drainage systems in order to determine what kind of value is provided by the system, what kind of capacity it has. And if we're looking in the drainage system's role for serving agricultural interests, which is what they originally were established for, we tend to look at a 2-year rainfall. And what that is in this area is 2.8 inches in a 24-hour period. That's that rainfall that we run through our models to determine how high the water will come up along the drainage system. And again, generally these drainage systems back in the day were sized to try to handle roughly that 2-year rainfall event, so they could be able to operate these lowland areas for hay and pasture. As the area has been evolving, the anticipated capacity of these systems and what they're used for has also evolved as well. And in urbanized landscapes, traditionally we utilize a 10-year rainfall as our design rainfall event. A 10-year rainfall is a little over 4 inches in a 24-hour period coming across that area that drains into the system. And that's frequently what we use to size storm sewer, size culverts underneath local streets and such. And so that's one of the metrics that we use for the urbanized landscape when we're looking at the capacity of the drainage system, how well it conveys that 10-year rainfall event. And then what's very important for people that have buildings and structures along the drainage system is what's going to happen in a 100-year rainfall. And what we consider a 100-year rainfall to be is a little over 7 inches in a 24-hour period coming down. And as many of you are aware, that 100-year rainfall, it seems to be occurring more frequently every year now. Things have changed over the last 20, 50 years as far as what they consider that 100-year rainfall to be. It ends up getting larger and larger. But that's one of the metrics that we use to determine how well does the system work in order to protect structures that are located along it. And the Rice Creek Watershed District has rules and metrics that it uses when it reviews permits in order to ensure that buildings that are built adjacent to one of these floodplains, that they're far enough above that 100-year flood elevation so as not to be inundated in any sort of frequency. A couple things I'll note regarding these proposed repairs: they will decrease the frequency of some of these damaging flood events, particularly those rainfall events that are the smaller rainfalls, that 3 to 4 inch rainfall event. Those will be conveyed at a much better capacity along the drainage system. It will decrease the elevations of those floods. The repairs will not have a substantial elevation on those very large rainfall events like the 100-year. Part of that is, again, because the drainage system was never built with the capacity to be able to handle that large of a rainfall event. But the bottom line here, and what I mentioned earlier, is it does enable you as landowners, it enables the Watershed District that manages the system and does regulatory work throughout the Watershed District, allows us all to be able to have a better prediction of what the flood elevation is going to be in any one of these given areas for these low, medium, and even the higher rainfalls that occur. Because again, with the drainage system in the condition that it is now, it does make it very unpredictable what those flood elevations are for some of those rainfall events, where a lot of it is based on that condition of the ditch. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the recent events that we've had on our way to get here, and I know Ashley covered that a little earlier here. But starting off back in July 2015, we did have a public hearing on the correction or reestablishment of the public drainage system record. And that was the very first step that we took in this process to have an understanding of where the alignment and grade and the cross-section of the ditch were as it was originally constructed. And that was very important for us to be able to know then what the Drainage Authority of Rice Creek Watershed District would have the authority to be able to clean the ditch to in both terms of depth and cross-section. Then from there in December of 2018, we completed a repair report which essentially identified what kind of deficiencies were occurring along the drainage system and what we recommended for to repair those deficiencies. And that repair report was focused solely on the portion of Judicial Ditch 3 that was located east of I-35E. There is another portion that's the outlet of the drainage system that is west of I-35E as it makes its way over toward Peltier Lake. That will be a subject of further investigation into the future by the Watershed District. So after we completed that repair report, we did have that public hearing in March of 2019. And as Attorney Colbert indicated, the board chose to go on a phased approach for the project. So in the summer of 2020, phase 1 repair and construction occurred. And that was along Main Trunk and Branch 3. The Main Trunk is the portion of the ditch that essentially runs from Bald Eagle Lake, or just to the north of Bald Eagle Lake, all the way back over to its outlet into the last stretch of Clearwater Creek before it goes down to Peltier Lake. And so that phase one repair focused on that portion of that main trunk all the way over to I-35E. And then there also is a portion of that repair that is along branch 3, which is a stub that goes off to the north across Frenchman's Road, heading up to the north. And that portion was, again, repaired in 2020. So now what we're here for today is the repair of the other portions of the drainage system, which include branches 1, 2, and 4. We did complete an addendum to our prior repair report in August 12th of 2022, and I'll get into a little bit more detail on that as we go here. Attorney Kolb talked a little bit about the standard for decision. I won't get into that in any great detail here. I'll talk a little bit about the location of the drainage system. So the JD3 system consists of a main trunk and 4 different branches. And as I indicated earlier, the drainage system does flow toward Peltier Lake. It stops just short of Peltier Lake, but it empties into the last portion of Clearwater Creek. It does drain the developing portions, or a large portion of those developing portions of Hugo, as I indicated earlier, both municipal and rural land use. It is the outlet for Bald Eagle Lake. It does not quite reach all the way up to Bald Eagle Lake, though it does stop short of that. But the water that does flow out of Bald Eagle Lake very quickly enters into JD3. So on the graphic here is the phase project that I discussed. Again, the yellow lines on the map here, they indicate phase 1, that main trunk, and branch 3. So again, the main trunk winding from near Bald Eagle Lake over to the interstate, and then that branch 3, the one that goes north and south on the top portion of the graphic. Then the areas that we're looking at now here today that are subject of this hearing are branches 1, 2, and 4. Branch 1 is that blue squiggly line that's on the lower part of the screen here. That outlets into the main trunk of JD3, a little bit further to the north from Bald Eagle Lake. Branch 2 is over on the right-hand side of the graphic. It starts at near Highway 61 and flows from east to west, again, over into the main trunk of JD3. And then the branch 4, which I have labeled on screen there, again, that's a little more toward the middle and left-hand side of the graphic. That generally flows from near I-35E, flowing to the east, and again, over towards that main trunk of JD3. Talk a little bit now about our repair report addendum. So again, we had given a detailed review of the recommended repairs for the whole drainage system east of I-35E in our previous repair report. The purpose of this one was to update our report so that we can identify that the deficiencies we saw in the system, that there's still an issue, and update the probable cost opinion that we provided earlier in our previous repair report. So a few things that we did were to complete a drone flight along the system, and you'll see in the subsequent slides here some of the aerial photos we took from the drone. We also completed a site walkthrough where we could get a little closer view of some of the construction issues that we might be seeing along the system, and those might be areas where we might have some access challenges, where we might have some obstructions along the way in completing the repairs, and identify how we might be able to work around some of those things. And again, as I mentioned, that updated probable cost, certainly it was important to update that to reflect current dollars and to get some more detail on some of the things we found out through our site walkthrough. So I'll talk a little bit about some of these conditions that we observed along the way, both through that site walkthrough and through our drone flights. It's important to note that on all of these branches, there is development in close proximity to the ditch. That does create some challenges with where we're working, but we did identify access corridors where we can work within that allow us to maneuver around through the channel with the least amount of disruption as possible. We did observe a lot of trees and brush along and within the open channel. These trees and brush provide an issue for the maintenance of the drainage system in a couple different ways. One is that as those trees end up falling into the ditch, they end up obstructing flow, and that's some of the issues that we're going to be trying to resolve along the way, is some of those deadfalls in the drainage system along with the sediment that's built up. A lot of times that sediment does build up quicker too. If you get one of those deadfalls in, acts as a natural break and holds up water so that that sediment builds up. The other thing that we need to do is create access to be able to get equipment in and out, not only for the repair of the drainage system, but into the future for maintenance and inspection. And so that's another component of the repair, is to try to clear that access corridor through the drainage system in that working area, the right-of-way of the drainage system, in order to complete those repairs. We did observe some heavy vegetation in the channel. In this example here, which I believe is on branch 4, if I remember correctly, we did see a major portion of the drainage system choked off with cattails. That will be something we'll be trying to address, is cleaning that vegetation out of the channel so that the channel can work a lot more efficiently. And that really does make a difference on these drainage systems, having that vegetation out of that channel. It does act as almost a very heavy sieve in the channel, makes it harder for that water to move through. Some of the effects that we'll see of the proposed repair, we are intending to remove obstructions where we see them along the drainage system. We're going to be removing that sediment that is built up along the system. We're anticipating that the average water levels in that open channel around the system will decrease by more than a foot along the entire portion of the repaired system. Again, this provides additional capacity for water to be able to flow through there. We aren't anticipating wetland or public water impacts that would require mitigation. The project will require coordination both with the DNR and with the local government unit that administers the State Wetland Conservation Act, and that local government unit in this case is the City of Hugo. I'll note that there is a public water that is along branch 4. This public water is as with any public water, it's a body of water that is regulated by the DNR under state statute. We are intending to clean out the vegetation in this area through the public water wetland. We aren't anticipating a change in the function of that public water as a result of the wetland or the repairs that would be completed through here. So we will have to engage again with the DNR in order to be able to complete these repairs along the drainage system. But again, we aren't anticipating any change, as we aren't planning to change the outlet of this public water, which currently is the Elmcrest Avenue culvert that is just downstream of this public water. We did complete due diligence on this repair regarding rare and threatened species that are on the state threatened and endangered species list. We have identified through the state mapping that they have that there are 2 known rare species near the project area. One of them includes a Blanding's turtle, and the other one is a excuse me if I pronounce this wrong, Wilson's phalarope. It's a type of bird. We will include a required fact sheet in our plans and specifications that will be provided by the DNR to avoid the nesting season in vicinity of the known sites, again, related to this bird that's on site. But we do not anticipate that any of the proposed repairs will impact either one of these species. On the screen here now, I've provided some examples of The types of repair that we would be proposing to be completing, we do replace culverts where it's necessary along the drainage system. We are planning to clean out the ditch, which means taking an excavator along the ditch bank and excavating into the ditch. We take those spoils or that sediment that has accumulated in the ditch, and we place that on the ditch bank where it gets smoothed and leveled out. We also will be removing brush and trees along the way, as we've indicated earlier. I have a graphic here that kind of shows how that occurs. This is just an example of the type of detail we would show in our project plans, showing the bottom of the ditch as it's cleaned out. Placement of spoil. This is an exaggeration on this particular graphic of how the spoil gets placed. Again, the intent is to place it and then level it. We include that as a construction bid item on the project for them to take care in leveling that out. And we check that diligently so that we aren't leaving a mess along the drainage system as we're going. And again, we do have trees that are required to be removed. We, as a practice, remove all of the trees and brush that are within the bank to bank of the ditch. Plus, there is that right-of-way corridor. The drainage system has a prescribed right-of-way within it that the Rice Creek Watershed District, as the drainage authority, has the ability for access. In order to, again, maintain that access, we do need to keep that corridor open. And so we, that right-of-way is generally on the order of about 20 to 25 feet from the top of bank over into the along the bank of the ditch. As a practice, we've generally tried to clear out the trees on one side of the ditch. And, you know, in some cases, we may need to be able to provide access on both sides, but that's something that we'll be looking at as we complete our final construction plans of the drainage system.
Could you rephrase that, that 25 feet, is that from the center line of the creek, or is that from the top of the spoil, an additional 25 feet for easement?
That 20 to 25 feet is from the top of the spoil or the top of the bank of the ditch over.
So further away from the creek?
That is correct. We do have a few examples of prior construction. It's important to note that construction, as it's occurring, is messy. You will see disruption along the drainage system as we're completing the work. But it is something that will look better as the project goes on, and that's what we generally request those landowners to have patience as this project moves forward. It doesn't look pretty during the middle of construction, but we are going to work to try to have it be a very nice product at the very end. So this is an example of what it looks like mid-construction. We do have culverts that we work on along the way. As you can see on the photo on the right, that's where we've started to level spoils off. And then what we do as a final stage of the project, we have it reseeded, and it's seeded with typically a roadside or native seed mix that would be located along those banks. And once that takes root, and we again require the contractor to manage that to make sure that it does actually germinate along the drainage system there, you will then see that restored vegetation along the system. I'll talk a little bit about that management of that ditch bank. As I mentioned before, that spoil will be smoothed out and leveled. And as I just said, they're seeded with a perennial type seed mix. It won't be turf grass, but again, it's that kind of more of a roadside type seed mix. In the future, there will be the need to use herbicide on occasion to maintain the vegetation so we don't get that tree growth and don't have that added expense another 20 years from now of trying to cut all those trees down again. We do recommend that landowners leave tall grasses in that area as much as possible. We'd like to see that not mowed. That does help with the stabilization of the bank of the ditch. And then we also do not want to see any placement of fences, sheds, or objects in that right-of-way. Again, that was a right away that was originally paid to the benefiting landowners of the system as a damage in order to be able to construct the ditch and be able to maintain it into the future. So again, we need to see that area stay open into the future so that it doesn't prevent our work to maintain it. As I mentioned earlier, we did update our estimated cost for the project. We estimate the actual construction cost of this Phase 2 to be a shade less than $380,000. We did originally have as an expense of the project a city road or trail crossing. We have eliminated that now because Elmcrest Avenue, since the time of our original repair report, has already been replaced now by the city, so that is not a project cost now. We do have engineering, legal, administrative costs added to this, and a contingency that's essentially 20% of the construction costs that we add in there for unforeseen site conditions that may occur along the construction project, and that's, again, very common. We don't know that exact cost right now. We throw that 20% in to add as, again, a buffer for those unforeseen additional costs. And so in total, we're looking at a shade under $600,000 for our estimated construction cost. So I'll talk a little bit about the project funding. Per the Rice Creek Watershed District Watershed Management Plan policy, the repairs on this drainage system in the previous phase were completed using ad valorem funds. Those are the district-wide tax funds that are taken out of the property taxes of everybody in the watershed district. And so we would be recommending that those repairs again be completed using those ad valorem funds. Future modification or maintenance of road crossings, those are the responsibility of the road authority that crosses the drainage system. So if one of those other road crossings need to be updated, or if a new trail crossing or road were added in there, that is the responsibility of the road authority. Any future modification or maintenance of private crossings are the responsibility of the landowners along the system. So if you happen to have a like a driveway or a private crossing of the drainage system, if that driveway fails in the future, it is a requirement of the landowner to be able to maintain their own culvert crossing. So the next steps on this project, we're here today for that board consideration of a resolution order to repair the drainage system. And if that occurs, then we'd be moving forward with plan development this fall and winter. And then we would intend to be having additional engagement with the landowners in the spring of 2023 ahead of construction. And we'd be looking at a summer 2023 construction, could potentially be also moving into the fall. We'll try to generally leave a wider open working window for the contractor to allow flexibility and to reduce the bid costs that come in for the work. These dates are approximate, as I've shown here. They are subject to change. And that's all I have for my presentation, and I'll address any questions I have now, that the board may have now for me.
Board, any questions for Chris? If not, the first thing we usually do is go to the online comments. Is there anybody out there participating remotely that would like to comment? Anybody? If you'd like to comment, just open up your mic and make the comment with the name and address. Okay, well, we'll wait on that, and we can go to the audience here. Is there anybody here that'd like to comment? Please come forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the records.
Good evening. My name is Gary Anderson. I live at 4643 Flora Way North in the Victor Gardens area, and in the Creekside Villas in particular. My home backs up to part of the drainage ditch behind me, right where the little bridge is with the path there. So I'm very concerned about that portion of it. and can only address my concerns to that particular portion that is behind my home and other adjacent homes in the Creekside area. I first want to commend you for your good work on behalf of all of us in assuring that we have adequate water flow and drainage in this area. It is a very important task. I lived for 8 years in Houston, Texas, where there was frequent flooding. 10-inch rainfalls were not all that uncommon. So I'm very aware of the problem. I do want to mention I've lived almost 14 years where I live, one of the earliest homes in the area, and I've never seen any flooding. I've not even seen the ditch behind me very full with water, occasionally on a heavy spring rain. But it does need cleaning, and in that regard, I want to address the use of the word repair. I've heard it used repeatedly this evening. It's a very good word. I think in your resolution I counted over 30 uses of the word repair. Now, when I bring my automobile in for repair, they will repair the brakes, maybe put in a new water pump, etc. When I go back to pick up my car, I do expect to be able to recognize my car. And I want to say that, in my opinion, the repair that was done on the previous branch coming from the east went way beyond the recognition stage. It was frankly quite devastating. And many, many things were removed from it, which in my opinion went way beyond repair. And I am concerned about that. Behind my home, we have many beautiful trees in our area. Clearly, some of them need to be removed. I do not question you in that regard. But if the kind of devastation happens in our area that happened in the other portion of the drainage ditch, is that one, I believe, I would be very, very concerned and disappointed. We love the green canopy. We need the green canopy. We need it environmentally. The city of Minneapolis is struggling with not having enough trees in many areas. Hugo does not have an abundance of foliage and a green canopy. We would hate to see that removed. I think the ditch needs cleaning. And the use of the word repair, I think, is ill-advised in terms of what you have done. And I would recommend you think about how the ditch is cleaned. And that involves some removal of some things, no question about that. And also then I would encourage how you maintain it, because we walk by the ditch regularly on the path that goes around the Victor Gardens area. And I see already all kinds of growth and development that need maintenance in what has been done. In fact, I was very disappointed in the planting that was done because we attended an earlier meeting a couple of years ago to hear about that, and I saw pictures of plants and so forth that were to go in, and we don't see any of that. So I recommend you clean and you address the water flow issue, but that repaired is not what is needed, as you understand, or at least have previously applied the use of that word in previous work that you've done. Elsewhere on the drainage ditch, perhaps more radical work is needed. But behind my home and other homes of some of us here this evening, I do not believe that's needed. And again, I thank you for your concern and your good work on behalf of all of us.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to comment tonight? Please come forward. Name and address, please.
Steve McCormick, 4620 Flora Way North, just a neighbor a couple doors down from Pastor Gary. I'm a new resident to the area. It's fairly disheartening to realize that we might be losing our entire tree shed in our neighborhood. As a retired dentist, I guess one question I would have is, and I've tried to practice this way, was don't make the treatment worse than the problem. And so if the problem is partially a foot of sediment, where is the source of the sediment coming from? Is it from the creek banks? Is it from the farmland? If we correct it and deepen the creek bed, what are we doing about the returning sediment? Can we create retention or detention ponds, dry or wet ponds, in certain areas of farmland that might be the source of the sediment? So I wonder about that. It sounds, by your own admission, that this is a flood management problem and not an environmental wetland project. And I'm concerned about the potential for stirring up additional phosphorus. As I went over and biked by Peltier Lake, I see blue-green algae alerts. If this particular branch, which I believe is branch 4, eventually empties to that lake, what are we doing for some of that runoff of this land, of this dirt that might be stirred up in the area? Yes, we're bringing it to the neighboring areas, but if we're taking 25 feet from the spoils area, that area is literally going to be at my doorstep. That is at 4620, my corner. I'll have to step that off, but if I go, my corner of my building cannot be more than 50, 60 feet from the center line of the creek. Now, if there's a giant cottonwood tree, half of it's down. I understand that, as Pastor Gary said, that's quite a big deal. You also admitted that this is not a 100-year project for flood management, it's a 10-year project. I question the validity of this nuclear response to these trees and this view shed with a plan that's only not even addressing the 100-year prospect, which you admitted is much more frequent. So that seems puzzling to me as well. I guess it just seems odd to me that we're not addressing some of those key issues, like where's the sediment coming from? And I'd also like to ask, I was told that there could be a site visit that's an option to actually come out to our property. If that's correct, I'd like to know about that because it'd be interesting to see a site visit and what the ramifications could be of that. And your last slide, I believe you said there was the construction was for projects ditches 1, 2, and 3. I think, is that slide supposed to be 1, 2, and 4?
Yes.
So I believe your last slide was incorrect then? If you pull that up, I think you might see that. So that would prevent...
You're correct. It should say branches 1, 2, and 4.
4, okay. So I believe that would then perhaps be a construction issue for 2023 that I'd be concerned about. So I appreciate your engineering work. That seems to be quite thorough, but yet I am distinctly concerned with the possible tree canopy loss in my property and some of the other ramifications I brought up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that'd like to comment tonight? Please come forward. Sure. Name and address for the record.
My name is Karen Cunningham. I live at 2310 East Cedar Street. And I think by looking on the map that I am in number 4, the branch 4, and that flows right through the back of our pasture. And that is very, very clogged up, I'm going to say right now, with cattails and trees and stuff like that. But did I hear you say that that's public waterways and you're not going to fix it? Is that what, did I hear that wrong?
Go ahead.
Madam President, no, that we are intending to repair through there. It is a public water wetland, so
Yeah.
The DNR has certain regulatory authorities over that area because of its status as a public water wetland. And so I was indicating in there that we do have to have regulatory coordination with the DNR regarding it, but we are intending to clean through that section, remove that vegetation to allow the water to be able to move through there and have the culvert that is downstream from there. I believe that's on Elmcrest.
So which way is it supposed to be running? Because it's not running. Is it go west to east or east to west?
West to east.
West to east. Okay,
Yeah.
so it goes through the development
Yeah.
and then over to Elmcrest.
Yes,
Okay, which
yeah.
is, that's exactly where our property line is. And,
Yeah, so we are
Okay.
intending to get clean all that vegetation out of there, decrease that inefficiency so the water can flow through there on its way over to Elmcrest.
okay. And then, like, I think he pointed out that it said 3, and I thought, oh, that means you're not going to do 4. But, okay, you are going to do 4.
Yes.
And is that, so do you have phases in this phase? Like which one's done first, or
No, we'd be constructing this as one project.
all at the same time?
Yep, all at the same time under
Okay.
one contract, and the contractor would then determine what's most efficient for them in their construction to be able to accomplish that work. And generally, they work from downstream to upstream, but it would, I guess, depend on what what's going to be easiest for the contractor to start with. But it'd be under all one contract.
Okay. And you said you have to talk to the DNR and everything about that. Do you foresee that that's going to take a long time? Because I have talked to them over the years, and I don't get nowhere. So, and our pasture is getting wetter and wetter and wetter, and the ditch is getting more and more plugged. So you're kind of nodding your head and going, yes, it's going to be a while, or?
I can't offer a prediction.
Okay.
When I look at this, I see it as being straightforward, but I can't predict how others are going to be looking at it, so.
Okay. Is the portion that would be west, so it kind of goes through the development there from the freeway, and then it goes east, is that also considered wetlands there? Or is it just, I don't know if you're familiar with where I live now, I think you do.
I would have to look at the map with you to determine where we're looking at, but there are a substantial portion of the area next to the ditch that are considered to be wetlands under state law.
Yeah.
But those aren't necessarily areas that are regulated by the DNR. Those would be the jurisdiction of the city of Hugo as the local government unit, whereas that area that you're talking about in your pasture, that is that public water that is administered by the DNR. But it's a kind of subtle nuance. They all have some regulatory jurisdiction over it. Any of those areas that have cattails or reed canary grass, those are considered to be either wetlands or public waters.
Yeah, we know we're wetlands, I mean, we know that. What I'm envisioning in my head is gonna happen is they're gonna fix the ditch from the freeway over to our property where the wetlands starts, and now that water flowing from west to east, now again, is gonna be going east into our property. That's what I'm thinking is gonna happen. Is that what, can we stop that?
Our intent is to be able to repair the ditch all the way along the ditch so that there is an outlet for the whole system so that it can
It won't get
continue.
clogged up and spread into our fields even more than it already is.
Correct.
Okay.
We're going to repair the whole branch.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anybody else like to comment tonight? Name and address for the record.
Hi, excuse me, Tom Hanson, 4617 Floraway North. I'd like to double down on what Gary Anderson said about the devastation. We've lived there at that address since 2011, and we've enjoyed the fruits of all the big trees and the creek and all the birds and all the beauty that goes with it. And we were here for the meetings for Phase 1, and we were told about how nice everything was going to be when they took down the trees, the plantings, and the maintaining of what you would do once it was completed. And none of that was ever done. I mean, you guys came in there and you completely devastated miles of the creek bed. You took trees and stuff that were not needed to be taken down. You came in and planted a bunch of grass, was never maintained, put a bunch of boulders down by the creek bed under the bridge. The kids are all in there. They've rolled all those boulders down into the creek, and nobody maintains that. And we're afraid now that with the walking path, the access that you have to come in and clean the Phase 4 is very limited for your heavy equipment. And there's going to be damage there. And when you get done, is this damage going to be taken care of? I know you say that it is, and you show pictures of what it's going to be like when it's done, but that isn't what we've seen in the past. What we've seen, again, is total devastation. We know it needs to be cleaned out, and you got to take some trees, but you don't need to take everything and devastate all the property in Phase 4. It's just unnecessary. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment? Let's come forward.
I'm Gary Wallen. I'm at 4651 Floraway. Same neighborhood. I'm not on the creek, but I'm adjacent to the creek. was involved in a lot of the meetings as everyone else, and I guess I would like to triple down or quadruple down with the devastation that it caused in the first phase. The need was fine. Right now, the water's super stagnant there. It's hardly moving. Maybe it's because we haven't gotten a lot of rain and not a lot of runoff, so that might be a reason. But again, the seeding, the poor job of the construction company when they did the berm and they left ruts all over on there, then they seeded, then some four-wheelers came through there on some sides, they ripped it up. Really, there's a few areas where there's good grass growing, but for the most part, it's weeds. And again, it's not been maintained. Now there's a lot of sucker trees that are starting to come up again. So again, we're concerned about the quality of the project being done and the carefulness, especially when it comes into areas that are near homeowners versus the first phase were probably less homeowner intense. And so I would encourage you to be careful if you can by taking less trees, being more careful in the excavation of it. I'm also concerned about the bridge, the walking bridge down there. I don't know if there's plans for that or there's no plans or you completely work around that. It's kind of an integral walking path through our neighborhoods, but it's kind of in the eye of the storm. So I don't know if that's going to be taken down. I don't know if what we're voting on tonight is a final, like we're kind of, create a Hiroshima through that area and we can't really change any of that, or is there a way to take a more careful approach, especially around more busier homeowner areas? So I encourage you to consider that. I don't know if all these things are final. Again, we all know it's needed. It should be done. It somehow has to be cleaned out, but just to be careful. If you could please do that. So thank you very much.
Chris, maybe you can address some of those issues. You must have inspected it after the contractor came through and all those issues. Just in general, is it the contractor, or is it the maintenance, or where do we fall into that?
Sure, yeah, Madam President. In order to know what the actual experience might be in each one of those locations, I'd have to go out and take a look at what the specific issue is. I guess I can address a few of the comments there now and how the process works. So as I've indicated a little bit earlier in my presentation, there certainly is more opportunity as we go through the process to engage you as the landowners. So we do intend to have additional discussion with you, a meeting in the spring, the opportunity to go through and do site visits. We did do those things on JD3. Part of the thing that we do need is to have the landowner engagement when we go out to do that. So if there are trees that are of concern to the landowners, we need to know about that before we start the project and do that. And so we do give the landowners opportunity. We try to work as much as possible to avoid those trees that the landowners point out that they have concerns about. And we do take those seriously, and we do try to avoid the high value trees as much as we can and still provide access to the project. So, but we do need to have engagement, and I very much encourage you all to be engage with us as much as possible. We do provide Ashley's information. I have my information. I provide you to have discussions with you along the way before we get to that construction, so we can be prepared for that and identify those specific locations that you are interested in. One other thing I'll note is the comment about the use of the term repair. I'll just note that is a both a term that's used in the statute and a term that's also used within the Rice Creek Watershed District Plan, and it has a specific meaning, and so that's one reason we use that. But I can certainly see your concern about our intent for that work. We are truly intending to be able to limit the amount of impact we have on the landscape as much as possible, but as I indicated before, in order to be able to get in and do that work, there is a certain amount of impact that we need to have during a construction project before things get maintained. We certainly would like to hear input from you on the type of seeding that we're doing out on the landscape. There is some availability to look at some different types of seeds that we can use along there, as long as they're a readily available type of seed that is used along in construction of our project. We have had in cases where we've used more of a strictly native mix along there. Those are some things that we can talk about with you, but again, one thing I pointed out is that we don't try to have the expectation of planting that, like say, a turf grass or replacing with sod or anything like that along the ditch bank. And like I said before, we do take those site visits seriously. I know there's also concern about looking at the sources of sediment. One thing to note is that the accumulation of sediment in the ditch, it literally is the result of 100 years of accumulation in the system. There may have been some maintenance in the past on the drainage system, but whatever maintenance has occurred has been very limited and spotty along the system. So it's literally everywhere that drains in the system that is contributing to the sources of that sediment. It's also important to note that the ditch does, from the sediment it does receive from the landscape, it does move that down the drainage system. We are going to, again, try to manage that sediment, take it out and place it and reseed it so that it doesn't go back into the ditch and downstream. And that's, again, one reason why we take getting that vegetation cover established seriously. But the district is serious about sediment management. That's why it does have regulatory rules regarding that with land development that occurs with any sort of ground disturbance over an acre. It does require a Rice Creek permit, and so the district does utilize this regulation in addition to projects that it does in order to try to manage sediment. And so the district does have, for instance, cost-sharing programs it does have with landowners to try to do smaller site projects along on individual properties in order to be able to limit the sediment that goes into the drainage systems or goes into the streams and so on and so forth. And so in that regard, we try to work on the limiting of sediment, and that also is a way to limit the phosphorus that goes downstream, because that sediment does have phosphorus attached to it, and so that's one of the ways that we can help with those phosphorus blooms that occur in the downstream lakes, is to try to manage that sediment at the site level. And again, that a lot of that is done with the regulatory focus and other programs the district does.
Chris, could you, I don't know how heavy the tree cover is here, but I know that in some areas we remove trees so we can grow grasses, because grasses prevent sedimentation. If you have a very heavy tree cover, you can't grow grass on the banks, and then you get sedimentation. So I mean, it's a balance that has to be considered.
Yeah, Manager Bradley, you're very correct on that. In fact, that's the project that we're working on right now in Circle Pines. That's one of the biggest issues there, is that tree canopy cover, and we're trying to correct that. We've been meeting with landowners, actually the last 2 days, Ashley and I have been meeting with landowners ahead of that project, which is actually going to be constructed in November. And we're talking through with these landowners on site about where their areas of concern are, including some of those trees that they want to try to save. So we've already gone out and marked some of those trees just in the last couple of days for that particular project. And again, we would be doing that same process here.
Go ahead, Steve.
Chris, somebody mentioned the algae blooms in Lake Peltier. Could you just mention what we've got going on with that, or what we've been trying to do with the Peltier?
Sure, yeah. So we've got a few different things going on in that regard. And, as I mentioned earlier, those other things that the district does in the regulatory program, other programs it does. We have done a recent study of the connection between Centerville and Peltier Lake. That was focused more on Centerville Lake, but also seeing how the Peltier Lake itself affects Centerville as far as the algae bloom that occurs on it. So the district is very active in that and determining the sources of phosphorus throughout the watershed district, which includes what's occurring on the landscape. It includes some of the sediment in these lakes that can release phosphorus into the lakes. And also the district works on carp program where the carp, they often stir the sediments up to release that phosphorus, and the districts have been very active in trying to reduce the carp population in order to decrease the amount of phosphorus that they're stirring up out of that sediment.
Okay, so is there anybody else in the audience that'd like to speak again before we close the open mic session? Come to the microphone, please.
I'd like to add one more time. You know, I don't think any of us has debated or denied that this needs to be done. But our concern is that last time that you did this, you created an eyesore instead of coming in and doing your job and taking care of it like you said you're going to. We're afraid that that's what you're going to do behind our homes. And it's very fearful for all of us. And we just don't understand how you could create this problem and everybody drives by it all the time and nobody recognizes it. It's just not right. So,
Madam President, I can speak to some of the maintenance.
Okay, go ahead.
So for the maintenance, construction, the contract closed out in 2021, and we were still waiting for vegetation to establish. So this is the first year we've actually had a full season that we can maintain it. It is still on the to-do list to be mowed. We have 116 miles of ditch. So there's a few other systems that have already been mowed. We're just waiting for the contractor's timeline to get over there. It is scheduled. So as far as the types of vegetation, I did notice after seeding they have difficulty with seed taking. We've had dry conditions for the last kind of year and a half, and so it's been difficult getting vegetation to establish on those banks, especially with the material that's on there. So it's something we're aware of in our maintenance program and something we're looking to address here going forward.
Madam President, I'll follow up with one more comment too. We would very much like the opportunity to, before we get out that construction phase, to be able to meet with you folks that have the concerns about the prior project, take a look at some of those things that you have concerns about, and then you know, we truly want to have this project end up in a result that you're going to be very satisfied with. So we'll definitely make the extra effort to meet with you and talk about those things and see what we can do to resolve that going into the next project.
You'll have to, excuse me, you'll have to come up to the mic so that we can put your name and address on the record. And we can get it recorded.
Mary Ann Anderson, 4643 Flora Way North. At what point will we know the date that you would be meeting with us? It's important enough to many of us that we would work travel schedules around it, but it would be very helpful to have the date as soon as possible. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I assume you can put together a schedule with appointments and start meeting with people, or?
Madam President, I think that we're going to have to move a little further in the process before we can get that going, because, you know, again, we're very early and we'll have to look at our schedule, but I guess we'll, as soon as possible, try to get for sure a information meeting timeline set up and try to commit to dates for that. Again, some of that also relies upon having available space to have those functions. And then certainly, you know, if there's specific interests that you want looked at, you know, sooner rather than later, you know, we can coordinate with you and actually could talk to you about trying to schedule a site meeting.
Well, I assume that some are going out of town for the winter or whatever, taking their vacations, so it's pretty important to get it, appointments anyway. Yes, please, back up there.
Steve McCormick again. I'm just picturing what seems to be essentially a superhighway funnel for water to evacuate the area with a deeper and cleaner ditch system. And coming from Wisconsin on Deer Lake, where we had a strong conservancy program that developed a lot of detention and retention ponds, I'm not sure why that can't be part of the solution to slow the water runoff on big storms instead of creating a superhighway of a creek that funnels it quickly downstream. If we have subtle retention ponds with some rock walls that say it's going to hold the water, after a foot it raises above it and can flow down. So as a layperson, I'm seeing what seems to be a fast exit for water instead of a slow exit that might percolate, soak into our water system better, and possibly require less invasive efforts on the ditch. So just curious.
And Madam President, important to note that the Rice Creek Watershed District, through its regulatory program, does require land development to develop those types of storage facilities that you're talking about. Every one of these developments that has over an acre of impervious surface that it creates, it does need to create those kind of ponds. Some of them are dry ponds where it percolates water down. Some of them are larger ponds. Those are all things that are occurring adjacent to the landscape. But there still is, even with all of those ponds, in order for them to function, we still have to have that channel to allow the water to get out eventually, because it's critical for them to have those stormwater ponds work to get down to it. And I'll just also note that the ditch itself, we aren't planning to dig it down any deeper than what it was originally dug to. So we're truly not making it deeper or wider than it was. We're just cleaning it out back to the way it was constructed.
Madam President, can I put a question to John Kolb? Yeah, first of all, we're very much into building holding ponds, and we work with the cities to establish those. We're trying to establish a $20 million program in the Roseville area, so we're very much into that. But John Kolb, our attorney, I don't believe we could do that on a ditch.
Madam President, Manager Bradley, it is possible to do impoundments on ditches. That's absolutely possible, and you've done it before. The issue becomes you're now acquiring additional property. In this particular landscape, because it is so flat, it's very difficult to contain water on a grade. Instead, you're creating just large ponds that are always full of water, and then they begin to behave like parking lots rather than anything that takes care of it. So it's quite a dynamic system, and I very much appreciate Dr. McCormick's comments, because he points out, there are these issues that are out there that he sees, and he has an experience from his community in Wisconsin. I believe that the district has been very proactive in its district-wide modeling to identify opportunities where it can store and retain water, because as the managers know, and the public probably understands as well, is that this particular area of the North Metro is challenged by the fact that it's got very few conveyances in grand scheme, and it's got a very high development pressure. And so the approach that the district has taken is to identify the opportunities where rate and volume control for the discharge of water can be addressed, and then has also put very tight development constraints on, to the point where, and I'll share this for the audience because you'll understand this, when people come in to develop, we talk at the staff level about, well, we'll just give them each a soda straw. And we'll say, you can do whatever you want on your property as long as you can fit all your water through the soda straw, because that is how limited the downstream conveyance is. So I think if we had the opportunity, and if the district modeling that's been conducted to date indicated that we could create storage or rate and volume control in this area, we certainly would. But as the folks that live there know, this is very flat, and where it's not upland for development, where it's upland for development, it's developed. And where it's not upland for development, it's wetland. And so there's just not a lot of opportunity here other than to try to move the water off in an efficient manner, in a predictable manner that can be then further modeled against. and then to ensure that at the same time you're meeting your statutory requirements, which are that you inspect and maintain these systems. So I guess to some of the other comments, when you use the word devastation, I know that's what it looks like. And in fact, we would be in tremendous regulatory difficulty if we did anything more than what we call repair, which is a statutory term of art, which means we restore the ditch to its as-constructed hydraulic efficiency. And as Ashley pointed out at the very beginning of her presentation, back in 2015, the board went through a process to actually investigate and study the originally constructed configuration and hydraulic efficiency of this ditch, held a series of public hearings, did a year's worth of coordination with regulatory agencies, Corps of Engineers, DNR, conservation districts for the counties, and came up with an agreed upon, based on the evidence, an agreed upon configuration of this ditch. And so, unfortunately, and this is not as satisfactory of an answer as I would like to give the public, the board is somewhat stuck. You're stuck with geography, which limits what you can do. You're stuck with the law, which says you have to do certain things, and then you're stuck with other regulatory controls, which further constrain that. Now add to that the complexity of this city or other cities that want to promote and develop a tax base, which means they're promoting development, and then that just adds more pressure onto it. So I know you all can appreciate the difficulty that they're in terms of having to make decisions. But that is the long answer to your question is, if we could here, I'm sure we would, and the preference would be to do so. But knowing what I know about the district modeling and what the engineers have tried to do out here, I think the intent, now intent is different from what happens on the ground, you've all seen that already, but the intent here is to do the minimally responsible response in order to satisfy your statutory obligation to maintain the system or to repair the system. And I believe that it's never perfect, but I believe that includes the commitment of the engineer and staff to further engage with the landowners to make sure that we understand what's very, very important to you, because we'd like to protect that, and that you understand where we can and can't do certain things so that there's no surprises going forward after it's done. Everybody here agrees that some work has to be done. It's really just a question of how do we do it in a way that it's never going to make everybody happy, but we do it in a way that addresses the things that are maybe most important to you, that are within our ability to modify the work to accommodate that.
Mr. McCormick, you do live in one of the most advanced cities in Minnesota, at least, in terms of reuse of stormwater. And we have given the city of Hugo several very large grants to assist that along Frenchman Road, where they're taking water off one of our ditches and they're using it to irrigate city property, playgrounds. And, it may be not too late for Victor Hugo Gardens to look at using its creek, its ditches, for reuse purposes. But that's a different consideration.
Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to speak? Please come forward.
Well, I am afraid, Gary Anderson, I'm afraid it's too late. It would have been nice had that been done earlier. The developers did not think of it, apparently. And it involves 3 or 4 different associations, so it is not just one unified community in Victor Gardens. A concern that many of us who have spoken this evening have is the bridge that is immediately behind my house. I see it out in many of my windows. It's a lovely walking bridge that was put in, about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. You're probably aware of it. What is the plan for that bridge would be one question. The second issue is, I guess, having seen that, and the word is devastation, I invite you to come out and look at what was done on line 1. going east to west. It is honestly ugly, folks. It's totally ugly. And whatever has grown along the banks there is just weeds, just garbage stuff. And it is an eyesore for miles. And that's what we're worried about. In addition to do that work, you went way beyond, I think, 25 feet. I mean, ATVs are running up and down it all the time. You could drive a pickup truck along the bank, frankly, and I don't think I'm exaggerating on that. I haven't tried it. I don't have a pickup. But this is what we're worried about that might have to go through behind our house. Is there some way you can have an access road without devastating the area on both sides of the bank? I understand the need to get at it. Again, we all understand. I don't think there's anyone here who does not agree work needs to be done. And the work in my vocabulary is, I know you have your technical vocabulary for repair. Again, my work is cleaning, and major cleaning, no doubt. So we're not arguing in a way. We understand your difficult position too, how to get this done. Our point is how to get it done and not have a huge environmental impact in terms of the appearance and the impact on the natural resources that are there. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Madam President, I apologize, I forgot to address that before, but that bridge, we are intending to work around it. We're going to clean up to it on either side. We aren't intending to do anything with that or move it or anything like that. We will have to cross the trail there. We'll do what we can to try to minimize any disturbance of that trail as much as possible. And again, we don't intend to work within an area any larger than is necessary to clean the ditch out and to be able to provide a future maintenance. But it does require a certain width to do that. But again, we'll be cognizant of that and certainly like to talk about individual parcel situations so that we can work with you on that. And one of the things too is that we can also have stakes set out there so both you as the landowner, us and the contractor are all in agreement as to where the edge of the work area is going to be.
Okay, any other comments? Anybody have any materials they brought today to submit? Anybody? Okay, well, hearing none, we're going to close our public hearing. And we'll go to the board's discussion. We were provided, who wants to speak?
Yes, well, we're going to have a board discussion.
Okay, well, let's get everybody on the same page here. Okay, so we have a couple decisions to make, recommended actions, and also a possible resolution. So go ahead, Manager Waller.
Good evening. So I'll look forward to visiting with most of you sometime this fall. I give you warning now. We'll come and take a look and see where your property is and what your situation. Earlier this summer, I had received complaints from some of your neighbors in the other associations about the lack of maintenance to the system. And what they mean by that was the shrub and saplings are growing up, haven't been cut, but the grass hasn't grown back well. It may be because part of the weather situation in the drought for the last 2 years or so. And it points to, and I think tonight all of you have helped support this. I happen to be discussing this item with the administrator this morning about how we need to make a transition in our plan from the repairs, which haven't been done in the last century, and we're going through this repair, to a consistent maintenance program on a more annual basis, such as the cutting of the grasses, making sure the grass grows there along the banks of the ditch system. That's something the district hasn't worked into the transition of that yet. It's important to do this and develop these minor maintenance programs on a more annual schedule. And I think that's what you're talking about tonight when I listen to you, is that, the continuous work on the system hasn't been done. There's just been this big giant force that's come through, and now we need the tidying up and the maintenance that goes on all the time. That's another phase of which the district needs to develop more extensively on what we're doing. I think we're going to move towards that. At least I am. I can't speak for the rest of my board members, but I'm interested in that. And so I thank you very much for coming here and bringing that issue up about the saplings, about the lack of the growth of the grasses or whatever, the stones that were moved by the children. Being a child who was in as much mischief, I can understand how that happens. And so I am the Washington County manager, and so I will obtain your addresses and come knock on your door.
Manager Wakeman, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, piggybacking on what Manager Waller said, we have had several conversations, and is a major priority after we get these ditches repaired. We've been talking about the fact that they have to be maintained, and we're not there yet, but we're working on it and figuring out exactly how that's going to happen, but it has to happen. So
And I believe it will. We've been very
It will happen.
short-staffed, and then we had
Yes.
COVID time, so it's been very hard to get to the maintenance part this last year and a half to two.
Yep.
Okay, so what would the board like to do? We have to,
Madam President?
Go ahead.
We did provide a deliberation guide for the board. It lays out your decision standard, and there are really two actions you could take tonight. If you feel that the comments that were received tonight should be detailed out with responses given in a draft of findings in order, whichever direction the board chooses to go, then our recommendation is that you adopt a motion to direct staff to prepare findings in an order consistent with the proceedings and to effect an outcome that the board feels is appropriate. Again, your decision standard is, are the repairs necessary, and is the proposed repair configuration in the best interest of the affected landowners? That's twofold. If you think that those comments should be included in and addressed in the findings in order, then we would ask that you continue the hearing to October 12th, your regular meeting, at 9 a.m. or by adjournment to appropriate time on your agenda, at which time you would consider prepared findings in an order consistent with the guidance that you would give. If you feel that the comments received tonight are not requiring the inclusion in findings in an order, then we have drafted an order for your consideration tonight that would direct the repair, but addresses the comments as follows. During the public hearing, the President called for an accepted public comment on the proposed repair. Comments and questions were referred to the engineer, attorney, or staff as appropriate, and comments were resolved to the satisfaction of the board at the hearing. So if you want to do that, you could adopt this tonight, and I would hand this out, and you could review it in advance. So I think those are your two options. Again, I'm not sure which direction the board wants to go. I don't want to presuppose that, but we can accommodate either of those actions, either an action tonight moving forward or a continuation and then an action at your meeting on the 12th.
Manager Bradley?
Madam President, thank you, John. I think that would be in order for us to reflect our intent with regard to working with these people individually and establish how we will proceed in an effort to address their concerns. I do not believe we can save every tree. I used to work helping site power lines. I'm familiar with the problems with putting things where people would prefer trees. We all would prefer trees, but we can't have both. So we've got to work as best we can. And I just thought maybe we could artfully work on the findings that would reflect that. So I would be, myself, be in favor of having us put this off until October 12th and give staff an opportunity to be creative come back with findings.
Madam President, could I poll the board on a few questions then?
Go ahead.
Would it be the board's intent that the findings be written to move forward with the repair as recommended by the engineer? I guess that's the first question.
Yes.
Okay, and then would it be the board's guidance to staff to write the order in such a way that would direct the engineer and staff to further engagement with the landowners in order to identify critical, natural resources or others that could be avoided in the construction of the project?
Yes.
Okay, then I think I've got enough to move forward and prepare findings in an order for you for October 12th.
Is that a motion?
President Pryder,
Go ahead.
if I could piggyback on that, please. Engineer Otterness pointed out that, as well as Ashley Ritchie, our drainage inspector, and all of us, that our process does include some of these things now.
Naturally.
And my point here is to just work to manage expectations with the landowners. I do not think that the comments that, or the questions posed to the board are suggesting that the work of the district on the public drainage system is a landscaping exercise. I want to be careful with that. The cost of that type of work, the very fine tuning, if you will, is a cost that comes back to the landowners on the system, or all the citizens of the district in this case. So I think some of this is business as usual, but of course we want to be attentive to those special needs where those things are located on your property and such.
To be clear, Administrator Thompson, I'm not suggesting we change our practice.
No,
Okay.
no.
I'm not suggesting we change anything, but I'm suggesting that we articulate what we intend and how we intend to interact with our customers, if you will, our citizens.
Very well.
You want to make that motion, action?
Yes, I would move that we direct staff to prepare findings in an order consistent with the proceedings, that the draft findings in order be written to adopt the engineer's recommended repair plan and order implementation of repair, and that we recess this hearing to the board's regular meeting on October 12, 2022 at 9 a.m. or by adjournment to an appropriate time on the board's agenda, at which the meeting we will consider findings and an order for the Phase 2 repair ditch 3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can I just add, it doesn't have to be an amendment to the motion, just for the public's welfare, that your regular meetings are held at the city of Mounds View, so that if they do want to attend and witness your adoption of those findings, they know where to go. They know when. We just need to make sure they understand
And
where.
we're still going to be in Mounds View on the 10th, is what I'm,
Yeah.
on the 12th, okay.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Thank you for coming.
All in
tonight,
favor?
And thank you for listening, making your issues.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.